My name is Ruby, a 26-year-old woman who isn't working full-time at the moment. I've always been the quiet type since middle school, preferring to keep to myself. I attended high school, but dropped out, so my education stopped at middle school. Since then, I've been living with my parents, working part-time jobs, and taking up freelance gigs I find online. I have an older brother named James, who's 3 years older than me and completely different. He's athletic, popular, and outgoing. He never wanted anyone to know he had a sister like me. He never brought friends home, and even when I ran into him at the store with his friends, he'd ignore me. I figured it was his problem, not mine. Once he went off to college and moved out, I stopped worrying about it. Then, talk started circulating about my brother getting married. At 29, it wasn't surprising. It was decided that he would bring his fiancée to our parents' house, so I figured I'd join them since I was home that day. Dad, Mom, I'm home, I called as my brother arrived right on time. When he saw me sitting with our parents, he looked a bit confused. Sorry to intrude, his fiancée greeted, unaware of my brother's reaction. Then she looked at me and said, H? Her eyes asked my brother, who is this? Apparently, he hadn't told her about me. Thank you for coming, my mother said, introducing herself, then added, this is his father. The fiancé bowed politely but seemed confused. My father didn't step in to clarify, and I could tell they weren't planning to acknowledge me. My parents had always been tough on me for not measuring up to my brother. Growing up, they often compared me to him, asking, why can't you do what he can? But as we got older, things shifted. Eventually, I was labeled a burden, a money-sucking leech. It was clear my parents were planning to ignore me during this meeting as well. I'll go get more drinks, my mother said. Standing up, she leaned in and whispered, why are you still here? Go to your room. I had hoped to make an effort to connect with my family, but it seemed like my presence wasn't wanted. Still, I stayed. My brother's fiancée introduced herself as Emma. She was also 26, but stunningly beautiful and had an air of sophistication about her, making me feel out of place. My brother didn't seem pleased by my presence. He introduced Emma to our parents, but didn't speak to me. It felt like I wasn't even there. Once the talk about the wedding was over, small talk began, but my brother ignored me completely. Then he asked, so, Ruby, what do you usually do? Before I could answer, my brother interrupted, saying, wait, Emma, don't worry about her. He made it clear. Emma was taken aback. That's right, don't worry about it, my mother chimed in. She's just a stranger with a blood relation. When my father said that, something inside me snapped. A stranger? I thought. This was never going to change. The meeting ended with my existence almost irrelevant. Not long after, my brother and Emma got married and started building a house. My brother worked at a prestigious company and, despite being in his 20s, had a good salary. Emma quit her job to be a stay-at-home wife. When the house was finished, we received an invitation to their housewarming party, with a select guest list that included Emma's family and my brother's co-workers. My mother started to fret, saying, the house is ready so quickly, we need to think of a gift. What should we get? My father said, we're family, it doesn't need to be anything special, and casually looked at the invitation. Only my parents' names were listed. I noticed mine was missing, and my mother seemed to notice too. She asked, Ruby, are you coming? I wasn't sure why she'd ask after everything that had happened. It's fine if I'm not invited, I said, declining, but my mother insisted. No, you're going. I'll make the arrangements. So, I ended up going. The day of the party, it started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to my brother's house. They didn't come out to greet us because of the rain, so we entered alone. As soon as we arrived, my mother turned to me and said, you pay for the taxi, and rushed out with my father, leaving me behind. I paid for the ride and rushed toward the entrance. Where Emma saw me, she looked at me blankly and said, who are you? I figured she had forgotten me from our last meeting, so I introduced myself. I'm Ruby, James's sister, I said, but she smiled and said, ah, the high school dropout. Nice. We didn't invite the parasite living off a parent. She said it casually, with a smile. My brother came out then and immediately asked, why are you here? I told you not to invite her. Why is she here? Well, I don't know either, my brother muttered. Emma changed her tone once she found out who I was. Honestly, she was even worse than my brother and parents. Would it have been better if I didn't come? I asked quietly. Yeah, you're a stranger because of your lack of education. Honestly, not finishing high school isn't even an education. he said coldly. Could you leave the property, please? Emma jumped in, backing him up with a calm smile. Her expression never faltered, and it was genuinely unsettling. Understood. I turned and walked away, but the taxi was long gone, and there weren't any nearby cabs. I didn't have an umbrella and walked through the rain, soaked to the bone, while I could hear Emma's laughter behind me. When I got home, my parents came back, acting like they had a great time. They looked at me and asked, "Why did you leave so suddenly? Couldn't even find a taxi for the ride back." "You're useless," my mother complained. "Sorry, I had a stomach ache," I lied. "You left over something like that? You're hopeless. Don't forget the gift for later," my father scolded. I had brought a gift for the housewarming but had taken it back home with me. I didn't know the address to send it and wasn't about to ask my parents. So, I texted my brother. "I'd like to send a gift, can you give me the address?" The only reply I got was, "I don't give my address to strangers." I couldn't help but sigh. Was this really what they enjoyed? Trying to make me feel small and private? It didn't just embarrass me, it was beyond ridiculous. I gave up on sending the gift and realized I couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer. I decided to leave home. I didn't have a full-time job, but I had saved some money from my part-time work. I rented a small room and, with little to live on, started streaming in my free time. I already enjoyed watching streams and was good at spotting trends. I made tens of thousands of dollars a month from streaming. The money was enough to cover my living expenses, so I decided to invest it. I wasn't using my investments, but they were doing well, so I decided to try running a small business importing and selling products. I was busy in a fulfilling way, and every day felt rewarding. There was no family around to complain about my time spent on the computer. A few months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't reached out to me since I moved out. "We need your help with James's finances," they said. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. What had happened to the brother who had just built a new house? They explained the situation. After my brother built his house, he had been hosting parties, meeting people like bosses, executives, clients, and Emma's acquaintances. One of them offered an investment opportunity, and my brother took the bait. He ended up losing a large sum of money, seduced by the promise of quick returns. I was shocked. My brother had a stable job, so if he had just stuck to it, this wouldn't have happened. "Who recommended this investment? Is it a scam?" I asked. "No, it's legit. It was one of Emma's friends," they said, completely trusting Emma. "How much do you need?" I asked. They seemed taken aback by the amount I was asking about. It was way beyond what someone in my position could easily lend. "Is that the actual amount my brother needs?" I asked, hesitating. As expected, they confirmed it. We were also introduced to the same investment, my parents admitted. They paused before responding. "I can't just come up with that much money, sorry." I was about to end the call, but they insisted. "We're your real family. Help us out in times like this." "Real family? It's too little, too late. Sorry, but I'm busy, and I don't recognize you as family," I said before hanging up. A while later, my parents' and brother's family showed up at my office. I was in a meeting at the time. My secretary told me, "There are some visitors for you, President." "I don't have any other appointments." "Who are they?" I was startled. "I don't know," I replied. I excused myself and went to the reception area. Standing there were my pregnant sister-in-law, Emma, my brother, and my parents. "You're running a company, huh? It's much smaller than where I work," my brother said with a smug expression, looking around the office. "Who are you?" I asked, acting like I didn't recognize them. "What's with your attitude?" my brother snapped. My mother quickly intervened. "We talked about this before. We need your help. You're running a company, so you should be able to assist us, right?" She shamelessly asked for money as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, it's a critical time for us. Emma is about to give birth, and the baby's growth isn't progressing well, so we need to see a good doctor. Please, Ruby," my father and Emma added, expecting me to clear everyone's debts. Some employees walked past the reception area and noticed what was happening, trying to get rid of them quickly. I said, "Please leave, you're causing a scene." My brother exploded in anger again. "What? We're causing a scene? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family?" he yelled. The employees, stopping in their tracks, looked on as my brother began to make a spectacle of himself. "Do you all know this girl? She dropped out of middle school. She was a recluse with no one to help her," he said, trying to humiliate me in front of them. But the employees responded with something my brother didn't expect. We know. Everyone knows the president's background. I do, too. The president hires many people from similar situations. Is there a problem? My brother, who usually only socialized with well-educated, high-income people, looked flustered and stammered. Meanwhile, my father shouted, "What a pitiful company, just a gathering of needy people." At that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception area, came out. He must have heard the shouting. My brother's face went blank and then turned pale as he looked at the man, lowering his gaze. "What's wrong, James?" Emma asked. My brother, "Idiot, don't say my name," my brother hissed at Emma, but it was too late. "James, oh, it's you?" The company president walked straight up to my brother and looked at him. "You're the guy who always follows Mr. Long, the division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company." The president's company was one of my brother's clients. My brother broke into a cold sweat. Well, I guess I'm not memorable since we're not a D company," he said, but when the president threw his words back at him, my brother froze. My parents, my brother, and Emma all fell silent, sensing trouble. I apologized to the president again, ignoring them. "I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave." "Oh, are you sure? I have time today, so I don't mind waiting. You can prioritize talking with your family." "No, they're not my family," I said, glancing at my parents' and brother's family. "They're complete strangers." After that, my parents' and brother's family were escorted out of the company. Maybe the interaction with the company president had stunned them, but they left without further protest. As for how my job was exposed, I later learned that Emma was the cause. She had a friend who was well-versed in investment schemes and had his ear to the ground. There was a young woman in her 20s making a name for herself as a skilled trader and business owner. When Emma saw a photo of her in the media, she realized that the woman was my brother's sister. The one she had heard was a middle school dropout and a neat freak. Emma told my brother and parents about this and suggested they ask me for money, since I didn't answer their calls during the day and didn't return them after their initial request. They showed up at my company. I had been treating them as strangers, so I decided to cut ties completely. But I couldn't help but dig deeper into Emma's connections. I was curious about her involvement in my family's financial troubles. It turns out, her ex-boyfriend was behind the financial scams, and they seemed to still be in touch. By the way, the child Emma was carrying wasn't my brother's, it was the investor's. No way, my brother was devastated. It's only natural to be upset when everything had been a lie. Emma had apparently been manipulating multiple men for money under the direction of her ex. In the end, my brother and Emma got divorced. Emma and her ex were arrested, but the lost money won't be returned anytime soon. After the incident at my company, my brother's position at work deteriorated. In his 20s, he was moved to a low-status department, and eventually resigned. His financial troubles and the trouble caused by the scandal may have contributed to his exit. My father also faced trouble after the president witnessed him losing his temper with a subcontractor. After an investigation into his work attitude, he was fired. Apparently, he had been making disparaging comments about anyone without a prestigious degree. Both my brother and father lost their jobs. Now, they've reached out to me again, asking if we can live together. I had them banned from entering my company's building, so they can't try to force their way in anymore. After everything that happened, they still tried to reach out to me, saying, "We're still family, right?" But my response is always the same: "I don't know you, you're strangers to me, and I have no intention of responding any differently in the future." Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Stay shocked.